Hola, ¿qué tal? Now this video is about referring to a past action, as you can see. Now in terms of who it's for, it's not so much aimed at those students that are expecting the very highest grades with a wide variety of language. It's more aimed at those students who are hoping for a good grade, hoping for a pass in their exams. Now, in terms of what we need, sort of key ingredients for a pass in Spanish is opinions, reasons, past, present and future. Now, most people can comfortably express opinions and reasons. We've been doing that since we started school. Things such as, I like it because it's fun, me gusta porque es divertido, or I don't like it because it's boring, no me gusta porque es aburrido. Most people can do that very comfortably, albeit it may be basic. But a lot of students find it tricky to express the past and future. So this video is focusing on how to express the past, and particularly what I think is the easiest way to do it. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail about more complicated ways. I'm just going to keep it simple, so that if you can't remember how to do it, it'll be easier to remember. So let's look at the options. So referring to a past action, there's two main areas. We've got the past tense phrase, the time phrase. Now, although there are some different ways of using phrases like yesterday, ayer, or 2 years ago, hace 2 años, but the easiest way to remember it is using the word pasado. Now, it's easy because it looks a bit like the English word past. It's got the same 3 first letters, P-A-S, past, pasado, so it refers to the past. And we tend to use it in phrases where in English you'd have the word last. For example, last year, el año pasado. Last week, la semana pasada. Last weekend, el fin de semana pasado. Yeah, so if you remember pasado, add it onto another phrase, then you can refer to the past time phrase. When it comes to the verb, we're talking about past action. Now again, keeping it very simple, not going to go into the he, she, we, they type forms, and just going to focus on the first person, the I form, because that's the part of the verb that you use the most when you talk about yourself most in your exams. So a lot of people find it quite tricky to remember all the different ways of forming the past tense or the preterite tense in Spanish. Things like swapping the AR for an E with an accent, or swapping the ER or the IR with an I with an accent, or even all the irregular forms of the verb. A lot of people find that quite tricky. So the easiest way that I recommend is using the word fui. Again, if you can remember all the different ways, great. But if you find it difficult to remember, let's focus in on remembering fui. So, for example, you might mention a place that you went to. You might say, last year I went to Spain. El año pasado fui a España. So therefore, all you need to do is remember if you can remember fui a, then you just add on the name of the place you went to. It might be, last week I went to London. La semana pasada fui a Londres. And if you're struggling to remember names of countries or a city like London, Londres, you can just remember any other town in the UK, because towns don't change for Spanish apart from examples like Londres. So you could say, for example, last weekend I went to Manchester. El fin de semana pasado fui a Manchester. And therefore you've got a correct reference to the past. Now, I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail with you now. I'm going to focus in on the past tense phrases. So the past tense phrases, or past time phrases, I should say, we've got examples like, as I mentioned before, el año pasado, last year, el mes pasado, last month, la semana pasada, last week, el fin de semana pasado, last weekend, el sábado pasado, last Saturday. So you can notice that if it's a feminine time phrase, most of them are masculine, but if it's a feminine one, like last week, la semana, then pasado changes to pasada. Also, if you want to mention a specific day, it might be el lunes, Monday, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado, Saturday, domingo, Sunday. So it could be any of the days of the week, and then just put pasado at the end. So last Sunday, el domingo pasado, for example. So let me just give you a few phrases, see if you can remember these to make sure that you can refer to the past time phrases comfortably. ¿Cómo se dice en español last week? Sí, la semana pasada. ¿Cómo se dice en español last Saturday? Sí, el sábado pasado. ¿Cómo se dice en español last year? Sí, el año pasado. So we got used to the idea of using a time phrase with pasado at the end to talk about something we did last year, last week, etc. Let's look at the verbs now. The verbs are really important in any language, and in Spanish that's no exception. So I want to talk about past action. We use the present tense verb, and as mentioned, one of the easiest ways to do that is to use the verb fui, I went. So I've already mentioned how you could talk about where you went with the name of a country or a town, such as fui a España, I went to Spain. Fui a Londres, I went to London. Fui a Manchester, I went to Manchester. You can also talk about masculine places you went to, such as fui al parque. So if it's a masculine, you want to say I went to the, it becomes fui al parque, I went to the park. Fui al cine, I went to the cinema. Fui al centro comercial, I went to the shopping centre. So just a few examples. It may be a feminine one, like fui a la playa, I went to the beach. Fui a una fiesta, I went to a party. And it may be that you want to refer to different actions that you did. So you don't necessarily want to just say, I went to a place, but you can't remember how to form the preterite tense for those verbs. So one alternative you could use is to put fui a in front of the infinitive for that verb. So for example, I went to play with my friends. If you can't remember I played with my friends, jugué con mis amigos, but you can remember the verb jugar, to play, that you can simply say fui a jugar con mis amigos. I went to play with my friends. You might want to say I went to speak with my friends. Fui a hablar con mis amigos. I went to eat in a restaurant. Fui a comer en un restaurante. You might not be able to remember if you wanted to say I watched TV. You might not remember that I watched was vi. So therefore, if you can remember to watch is ver, you could say I went to watch TV. Fui a ver la tele. I went to watch a film. Fui a ver una película. Okay? So I'm going to give you a few of these phrases, see if you can remember. ¿Cómo se dice en español? I went to the cinema. Sí, fui al cine. ¿Cómo se dice en español? I went to the beach. Sí, fui a la playa. ¿Cómo se dice en español? I went to France. Ajá. Fui a Francia. If you can remember, France is Francia. Fui a Francia. ¿Cómo se dice en español? Look at some verbs now. ¿Cómo se dice en español? I went to eat in a restaurant. Sí, fui a comer en un restaurante. ¿Cómo se dice en español? I went to play football. I went to play football. Sí, fui a jugar al fútbol. Muy bien. Now I'm going to go back to the original slide now to put the two things together and double check that you can remember. ¿Cómo se dice en español? Last year I went to Spain. Last year I went to Spain. Sí. El año pasado fui a España. ¿Cómo se dice en español? Last weekend, remember weekend, el fin de semana. Last weekend I went to play football. Last weekend I went to play football. Sí. El fin de semana pasado fui a jugar al fútbol. Okay? So you literally use the infinitive of the verb afterwards. I'll give you one more using the infinitive. ¿Cómo se dice en español? Last Saturday I went to watch a film. Remember a film? Una película. Last Saturday I went to watch a film. Sí. El sábado pasado fui a ver una película. Okay, so hopefully for those of you that find it tricky to form the past tense and to refer to the past using the preterite, then this will show you an easier way to do it using a time phrase with pasado and using fui a followed by a place or an infinitive to help you do that. Okay, muy bien. Buena suerte. Good luck.